Hello everyone, Mike Levin, Friday, July 28th. I guess around lunchtime, one would say. And I'm trying to get a good shot there of that interesting luxury building next to the office. Wow, I priced those once. It's about $4,000 a month for a studio. Nah. I'm gonna be in Staten Island, a bit closer to Addie. And my commute to here, Lower Midtown, will be even a little bit quicker. I'll probably end up taking the express bus or perhaps the ferry. And in either way, imagine the change in the texture in my videos that's coming. It's all about the commute. The express bus will be a quicker commute, but probably less walking on either side. Do these videos continue? Ooh, mystery. Not sure. I don't know. These videos only exist because they're convenient, and every once in a great while I am inspired to do one at home just because I'm walking around and I'm puttering and whatever activity it is, like recently straightening up for an open house, could certainly be compatible with shooting one of these videos, doing this concurrently with some other activity. If you don't mind tying up one arm constantly holding the camera. I don't use a selfie stick or anything. This is me just basically dangling my wallet in front of my face, pointed at myself as I walk through the streets of New York. And you know, you get a lot fewer looks than one might think because, you know, a lot of people are talking to each other on FaceTime and stuff. This is not as unusual as it used to be. You can have like a virtual companion here walking with you by your side as you walk. And I think sometimes when people realize I'm recording a video, it's like, hey, so what? They see these people on YouTube all the time. If they don't see them, they know people who watch them. We are the very, indeed, long tail celebrities. We're the long tail of the long tail. In that first level of Zoom, you're gonna find Rand Fishkin with his hipster mustache and Danny Sullivan, and a whole bunch of others, Brett Tackby, who, these are people who I've known. They don't know that they've known me because I've just been some guy on their forums and stuff over the years. I remember searchengineforums.com, the old original search engine forums, under acknowledged because it was owned by a guy named Jim Wilson who, you know, rest his soul, had left us early in the whole internet game, or he would have been one of these big players, kind of like one of these Craigslist guys. But Jim Wilson was no longer with us, and I think it was Virtual Promote was the company that took them over. I don't know. SearchEngineForums.com got the reputation for being where the noobs went, where the people who knew anything were over at Brett Tackby's forums, paying their annual dues to be in the inner circles, where things were discussed that were legitimate, yield, you know, data science tests and experiments. Everyone knew how to write crawlers and collect data and plop it into a relational database system. You know, a lot of Microsoft SQL Server in those days because it was an affordable way to go, actually, believe it or not, compared to these, you know, ready for prime time clustered, but has to be clustered servers, database systems out there. You know, it was a big investment to do database stuff. Unless you could get it down to a single machine, then try SQL Server, and it will scale vertically as the hardware and storage capacity does. Processing and storage capacity, you know? Faster the node, faster the database. And, you know, that whole tightly coupled island approach has some validities, you know? There's legitimacy in the claim that monolithic apps that talk, where the parts talk to each other the best way the hardware will allow, i.e. hacked, someone who knows what they're doing, wires things up down at that hardware level and creates, as a result, a superior but likely proprietary system, i.e. iPhone. I love me my iPhone. Apple did a great job. And, you know, I got some of these, you know, pisher commenters in my YouTube videos who, when I say I'm telling the untold story of Commodore, challenge me and say, it's all over the internet. And I'm like, show me where, anywhere it says that the fact that Apple understood that the only cheap microprocessor powering the home computer industry came from their main competitor in the industry, Commodore, who created the Commodore PET, a completely legitimate first of the viable personal computers. Ye old IBM PC before IBM joined the market. Commodore made one of those. Commodore then proceeded to make an 80-20 rule, everything that most people would want as enough in a home computer, for like 1/10 the price of anyone else. That was Commodore because they bought one of their suppliers of microchips that happened to be in Norristown, Pennsylvania, called MOS, that was co-founded by Chuck Peddle, who was previously a Motorola employee, where he participated in the 6800, very powerful series of chips that powered some computers of the day, but never became the mainstream one like the Intel chips, but rather was this parallel thing. Once they put another zero after, and it was a 68000. It's the familiar chip that powered the Macs, the first generation of Macintosh computers, the first generation of Amiga computers. Everything that came before the Power PC was in this tradition of microprocessors. Well, the price of entry was usually at least a couple $100. The MOS 6501, which was a knockoff of that chip, was about $20. Uh-oh, intellectual rights issues. Okay, the 6502, a little less infringing. And that was sold to the personal computer manufacturers of that era before like the Zilog chip and some other few alternatives came onto the scene. But really, it was an MOS game for the processor that went into the Apple II, all the Ataris, and Commodore's own computers. So what's wrong with this picture? Your competitor is the sole provider of the microprocessor that runs your bread and butter product. It's like you sold cars, but the engines could only come from one source, and that was MOS Technologies, which became owned by Commodore, which was in Westchester, Pennsylvania, so as to isolate the engineers because of this crazy belief that you had to stop the exchange of intellectual property that occurs naturally as a side effect of employees switching who they're working for. So these employers wanted loyalty, and they wanted to drive a lot of creative work out of very few people who were working at the peak of their game, one of which was Ray Miner, who, together with his dog, oh, I can't believe I forget his name. Ray Miner, I said Ray Miner, Jay Miner. All right, commenters, I caught myself. It's RJ Michael, who was on the software side doing a lot of the Unix-like stuff that ended up being the Amiga OS. But on the hardware side, it was Jay Miner, who was part of the team for the Atari 2600, the first video game home computer type device that people of my generation was ever introduced to. You know, unless you happen to be amongst the rich, and you might have had a home Pong console by that time, and you know, ColecoVision and television, they came in around that time. But no, it was Commodore who rose above the others as the first legit home computer fulfilling that niche market, the Commodore 64. The Commodore 64 was, based on the numbers of sales, more popular than every other personal computer, and profitable, I may add, added together. Every Apple II, of which, I don't know, a few 100,000 were sold, right? Versus the Commodore 64, of which something like 30 million of a single model computer, and that's not including whatever's going on today with the knockoffs, with licensing agreements being paid to whatever remnants there were of Commodore. So what happened is this company by this, Holocaust survivor, Jack Tramiel, who was in the calculator business, who decided it'd be good to get into the personal computer business, brought a bunch of talented engineers together, managed to acquire one of their key suppliers, Moss Technologies, which was in its backyard in the same general area in the suburbs of Pennsylvania where I grew up, where I had friends who were clued into all this, who saw this playing out around them and were very excited by it, the way one is excited by, say, sports or music, fascinations, affiliations, watching, being a fan on the sidelines. That was Mark Rifkin and Ed Flacco. I mean, these are people who I still stay in touch with online to this day. Thank you, the internet. Where all these predictions they knew I made ages ago, like proximity, near field, keyboard lists, things that just connect to whatever's around you for what you need for user interface. I called it the proxy. And all these things, it was like, oh, this is the way it's going to be. I can't believe it's possible now. And over the subsequent 30 years, I've seen it all play out. And nothing's ever been as exciting as seeing the Amiga emerge, which was the blending of the independent creation of the Atari engineers, mostly the hardware engineers, mostly Jay Miner, who brought together a team of badass coders, chip designers, operating system people, and even hardware hack visual, what you would call members of the Euro scene, people like Dale Luck, who coded up the Boing Ball. People who were around in the Amiga days know exactly what I'm talking about. And you grab the screen and you pull it down to reveal the desktop or some other app running underneath doing its thing. You pull it back up and you go, oh yeah, no big deal. And you knew you were about 20, if not 50 years ahead in computing from where people around you are at. And what you're doing looks like pure effing magic. I'm going to try and keep myself PG here. I want to use the bad words, but good examples. Okay, so here I am, having fallen in love with the Amiga technology, being one of those ones who let it out of my grasp and took as safe harbor Microsoft. Deeply invested myself in Active Server page, VB Script, IIS, SQL Server, SQL itself, and became basically a LAMP master, which is the free and open source equivalent side, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and language of your choice. And a call came in that interrupted that recording. And it was getting long anyway, and my battery's really low, and I'm heading back to the office now because the time I gave myself for lunch is up, and I think I'm just going to grab a quick soup at Essen, and usually udon noodles with beef or chicken. I try and mix it up a bit. And I almost never vary what I have for lunch. I eat the same things, and I try and vary my walks because around me, wow, all these places. I'm walking by that famous burger shack here that people wait in line for like a half hour for, and I'm going to be passing some historical statues and fountains and stuff that people are like doing picnicking, and it's a day in the park in the summer in New York City, and taking a walk through it is, I think, one of the perks of my job. It's weird, but now, having to take this next step in my field of SEO, which is changing from a nifty bag of tricks into, oh my God, you have to pay attention to a god-awful number of things, and you have to look at that data in joined and combined and statistically analyzed and run through data models and variously visualized ways in order to see what the heck is going on, what the data is trying to tell you. Looking for things happening at times and places and showing them as they change over time. And realizing that those waves and color gradations or whatever, however you're visualizing it in any of a dozen ways, with what I think will end up being the Bokeh library under Python for me, for always visually enlightening and sometimes interactive, I am led to believe, isolated from having to delve into the hell that is JavaScript through some very JavaScript savvy yet Python loving folks who do all that stuff so that you don't have to, and you work with a Python API, a Pythonic API, using Pythonically shaped data structures that you know and love, from lists to tuples to lists of tuples, and create matrices that you can process fast because of things like pandas, and apply various canned data models because of pandas, again, which has a bunch of stuff you use for even machine learning on hand. And when it doesn't, you can pip install TensorFlow and do that kind of stuff too. And you can look at problems and start to examine them from various angles beyond those that worked well in the days of bags of tricks. Check your titles and your meta tags and the length of things, and maybe pull in some data sources and correlate click-through rates with URLs, with keywords, and make some suggestions based on some basic algorithm. That was SEO 1.0. I used to think it was 2.0. I used to talk about SEO 2.0 and think it was spitting out thousands of pages. Just with little stupid tricks to create high-performance static files that worked really well in SEO when they were linked together in such a way and got a good inbound link from someone who had some of that juice to throw your way. SEO 1.0 was kind of fun and interesting, and I thrived in that environment. And it was easy to pivot my job from webmaster to SEO. Thank you, Adam Edwards, another major influence on my life, the guy who brought me to New York, basically. And here I am, understanding that I need to pivot again, just to keep myself sane, because, grasping onto a career that relied on a bag of tricks, that it helped to be one of those intuitive with data people. You just knew what was going on by being exposed to the data long enough. I mean, that happened to me various times in my career. You become one with that website and your employer. You become very tied to them, and that you can shape icebergs of content and their related links as if you're manipulating icebergs from your fingertips. And I thrived in those days too, because that's what I could do, using the XSLT templating language to transform my XML data sources that were the output saved from SQL queries that knew how to query their tables in order to build XML files that could be XSL transformed into static HTML files. All automatable, all back-endable from any system. I could just wire it up and auto-publish your stuff overnight. Caches be damned. A normal web server could handle the capacity that's serving the same bunch of files over and over that kick ass in search call for. SEO 1.0. I created Hittail. I taught people how to create that positive, righteous feedback loop of what your data, what your search hit data, what your passive radar that was always sitting there and listening because someone searches in Google, someone clicks on you in the results, someone hands over to you the fact that you were found by being clicked. And you knew how many pages in they were, and for a time, Google passed along to you what actual position you were in on that page when they clicked, or what position you were in absolute terms. So if you were in position 30 or however deep they went. And that was just all available to you through parsing your log files or creating your own GIF tracking system like Google Analytics, all of which I did These are tasks that I did with various programming languages and web hosting methods in the past, like serving that invisible pixel and using a binary, object, outputter to display the code you needed in order to do all that neat tracking. Look at the request variables for that pixel that are sent on the request, and store all that yummy data, query it different ways, and have an insight onto the crawlers that visit your site that no one else has. And so all these sources of data, you sort of like have to reach out, know where they are, knit them together, and draw a picture and arrive to some conclusions based on that picture. And it's tricky. It's kind of hard to do. Oh, let me see. I think I'm just gonna do the bagel thing today. Fridays is bagel day and they last for a good while. So I did a walk without getting lunch today. That's good. Shoot a video. This is what I needed to do. I needed to think. And so I'm going back up to the office now to implement the scheduling thing that I had thought through. And I wanted to capture some ideas that I had on my walk here coming out. And to wrap this thing up neatly, I should say something about that. I'm going to edit these two things together. The videos exist because I don't edit yet. An occasional edit is necessary. What am I going to use? How do I bring it in? Free and open source, rah, rah, rah. Live in the proprietary world. People pay your paycheck. You respect that. Yet you can think out loud on your time and work through certain issues where you're forging a path now, having finally fallen in love with the first technology that's come along since the days of the Amiga. There's the connection, right? I loved me the Amiga, I loved me AREX. I love this derivative product that was so uniquely with that moment in time in the world that everyone knew they were involved in something special, and there were all these niche communities around the Amiga, from the video toaster people to the Euro hack demo scene people to the virus people. I mean, it got really crazy on the Amiga. I would call it a social schism, a bunch of people who were insanely, greatly tied together in all the ways Apple wished their product was, and had a tremendous inferiority complex to the Amiga during these days, praying that the world would not notice its superiority. And indeed, the world did not notice its superiority except for a vocal few, and the Amiga went away, and to be replaced by nothing in my heart but heartbreak after heartbreak, from the Microsoft Active Server page world to my first attempt at Ruby on Rails in the early days, having hated it for making frameworks of myself under Visual Basic by that time. I mean, VB script, knowing what I wanted and knowing Ruby on Rails wasn't it, and API support for that language, no thank you. Having been led to Python through various circuitous routes that date back farther than I'm, proud to admit, to the days when I was on a spin-off company of Commodore, of the Amiga, called Scala, where a friend of mine, Guillaume, from Japan, tried to convince me to go to Python when I was looking at Ruby. I didn't. I was struck by about the same thrill as those who think it's named after the snake. It is not. It is named after Monty Python's, of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, of, those guys. And it is a tribute to a way of thinking that is very offbeat and satisfying. Somehow it works. Python is a little bit quirky in all the right ways. The way it uses white space and does what you try and do anyway, but it makes it count. White space indent matters. And that creates a huge divide, because a lot of people who think they're the badass comp sci people who came up through the Java route, yeah, they're not too thrilled about the Python power that is. And, those who are living the Python experience along with me know what I'm talking about. you can go any direction, embedded if you want, or controlling the machines that are going to think. It's all Python active, virtual, data center hosts of your own in a shoebox with OpenStack. It's all Python. Data scientists who are doing their own comp sci work because they can now, thanks to Jupyter Notebook, Python. Thing after thing is Python, and the Java people who had that mantle, had that throne, had that top position on the, everything, every metric that's measured and counts, award trophy ceremony, has to take a step down as the Python guys get on that top one. So that's what's happening right now, and I'm just one of the many voices who, are saying, yeah, me too. I'm also a Python guy, and let me show you all the tiny little reasons why. I've spun myself a Linux, distro, a respin. I respun other people's components. The QEMU PC emulator, very popular binaries that are widely distributed. If they had terrible exploits, would be, taken down. I use those popular distros of the QEMU binaries so that I can get the same virtual machine to instantiate on either a Linux desktop, a PC, Windows desktop, or a Mac desktop. Same virtual machine spins up. Has your work as last you saved it. You have to deal with persistence issues and facts that the whole Linux system is really residing in 512K of in-RAM memory, so every time you turn it off, it wipes everything that's not saved, and you get that environment. So it's a nomadic portable Linux. I call it Levinix, and I just mix this together and I put it as part of a Microsoft, a Macintosh app bundle thingy, where if you arrange certain files a certain way with an XML file as a configuration definition, it works by the attempt to open a directory actually runs a script, a program that you have embedded into it. So a directory works like an application, i.e. a trick I did with WBScript, a program written by Howard Harrison circa 89 maybe, on the Amiga desktop to get that same trick, and it works great. WBScript, Howard Harrison. So this video, I think I will edit end to end and get this whole picture. I've been there, done that a lot of times in tech. I've had a lot of tech heartbreak. I discovered my Python. That is a good thing. I will start to get compounding returns in my career, in my life, with things that are automation projects where I deal with even long-running execution context, choice of cloud, Raspberry Pi. I love this stuff. I was the guy who did the original unboxing of the Raspberry Pi that got, over 1 million. It's probably pushing 2 million views. I don't know. I stopped looking, but that was one of my claims to fame. So I identify these things early, and I identify me local processing power coupled with machine learning, privacy issues, raising a child into the age when robots are going to happen, and other cool stuff, as long as we keep that close eye on the cornucopia of things in the existence book. Sci-fi fans who read that book will know what I'm talking about, and I try not to be fatalistic in all these things, and I keep a positive outlook, and I make it a fairy tale, and I tell that fairy tale to Addie, and I capture those stories. I recognize the recognition of storytelling, encoding, and poetry and prose, poetry verse prose, and issues of self-expression and expressing ideas and data structures and patterns and running algorithms through machines as if they were mechanical switches that they were. And realize that this is a way of thinking that people need to be trained to see and do and to behave in and to become one with, and just generally be capable of understanding things going on around you so that they do not all fade into the realm of magical, which is going to happen in a generation or two. So I wrap up there. I get back up, make me my bagel, and I get back to work finishing this scheduling thing, which has just been a delight to tackle. Answering the question, why does it work under one EC2 instance? Why not Ansible? Why not Celery? Why schedule? And why a couple of these other little things that I throw in for logging and ASCII art and color coding, color text? It's because it rocks, it's cool. It makes you feel good about what you do. You like to check these systems and you get into the right habits and you look at them every day and you become the guiding hand on all these systems. Thanks for joining me. Talk to you again soon, and don't forget to subscribe.